Memories by Chris Sivright.
It was nice bumping into Lucy on my way to the parents' evening. She was a good pupil, always one of my favourites. She seemed surprised and pleased to see me too.
I was on my way home from my afternoon shift when I met Steve, my old, and I mean old, maths teacher from school. Normally I don't go anywhere near the school, memories and all that, but I was in a hurry.
Lucy didn't seem in any hurry. We were able to have a chat. I'm always willing to stop and talk to an ex-pupil. In a way, that's part of my job, but it's always a pleasure, never a chore, as they say.
It was all a bit awkward. Of course I recognised him, but I didn't really want to stop. Problem was, with the pushchair and all that, it was difficult, well, to get past him. He's become so fat. Why don't they have pushchair lanes on pavements like there are bus lanes?
Lucy looked very pretty. She had a baby with her too, in a pushchair. Lucy said the baby was 18 months, but it looked about, well, believe me, I'm no expert. It looked about 3 years old. A bit old for a pushchair, I'd have thought. Couldn't see the child very well, almost totally covered up. The weather didn't seem that cold.
Steve wanted a close look at my baby. Well, I say baby, but actually he's 3 years old. Problem was, it was a troublesome birth, several months early, and my child is very, very frail. I have to keep Jim, my baby, well wrapped up. Can never be too safe with all those viruses flying around. Safety first, that's my motto. Well, it is now. Anyway, I didn't want Steve's fat fingers probing around. He looked bad enough when he was my teacher, but he must have put on at least 4 stone, and yet he's just a few years older than me.
Of course, I don't feel the cold much. Lucy commented on how I had changed shape. Must be all that writing on the board and walking to school. I must admit, I have quite a trim figure. Of course, it is natural that people of my age have a midriff tire, but then who doesn't? I blame the Tories, the nasty party, and their education policy of minimising costs in the canteen. I have to have 2 helpings of everything just to feel full. Lucy looked good though. When I last saw her, she had a slight tire too. That has been thoroughly worked off. Must be all that activity she got at university. We all know that the main reason people go to university is for the social life, and we all know what social life means.
Steve wanted to tell me all about his class and how the syllabus had changed since he had last taught me. Apparently it's all much easier now, and even an easier syllabus, all the kids are so dumb that they'll barely be able to cope at university, even when the subject is not directly linked to maths. He said he was running extra classes, just like last time. Strangely, all the pupils who come are female. He said it was because boys don't want to put the hours in. He made some crude joke about boys wanting to put other things in, but I refused to smile. He is a disgusting man.
Lucy asked me about the maths class. I told her how none were as clever as she was. Mind you, I am sure the extra maths helped her. I explained how in her day there were plenty of people who wanted extra help, but nowadays the boys are all hoodies and girls all have part-time jobs. Only the very few stay behind. None were as dedicated or as keen as Lucy. She smiled when I said that she was dedicated, so I made a slight joke about boys putting it in. She seemed to think that was very funny. I know she pretended not to, but inside she was laughing, I'm sure of it. Always had a slightly crude side, did our Lucy?
I explained to Steve that I had to go as it was cold and I was expected home, but he seemed to have all day to chat. He asked me what my child's name was. I told him it was Jim, as I did not want him to get too interested. He also wanted to know what I had been doing since I left school. He commented on how slim I looked and wanted to know what I did, nudge nudge, to keep slim. I told him I'd been to university, which is true, and was now happily married and living a few miles away. I most certainly did not tell him I was a single parent on income support and still lived happily with my parents.
Lucy seemed to want to tell me all about herself. I was always a good listener. Even when she was at school and was having trouble at home, I would always listen. I know she used to have trouble in finding a boyfriend and always felt that she was unattractive. I used to give her advice on that too. She told me about her baby, Jim, and how she was happily married. Her husband's a lucky fellow. Lucy was always very supple, and I'm sure that is what keeps a marriage strong, if you know what I mean. She lives some way away, but her husband has the car today, and anyway, she said she liked walking. Always keen on fitness, Lucy. I'm sure Jim will grow up in a stable, happy family. I told Lucy that June, my wife, is expecting again. This will be our 4th child. The last child was born a few years ago, in fact, about 6 weeks after Lucy left. It's very stressful being a parent, especially when your wife is pregnant. It takes a lot of the romance out of marriage, and the bed somehow seems smaller.
For some reason, Steve wanted to tell me about his wife. She's pregnant again. That woman seems to spend all her life getting pregnant. I reckon it's her way of being able to say no to Steve. Being able to blame the pregnancy. It's one way of keeping him off. I remember the last time she was pregnant, I had been going through a rough time.
Of course, the last time June was pregnant was a particularly low time for Lucy. She used to stay behind after maths extra lessons, and we'd talk. And talk. And talk. Sometimes we'd even go for coffee. Always very innocent. I used to hold her hand merely to comfort her. Nothing else. It's the sort of thing we are encouraged to do at Bedlands, to comfort pupils if they're depressed. It's all pastoral care. Part of mending broken Britain, I reckon.
Sometimes Steve would invite me for coffee. Always a bit creepy. He'd sit at the table pouring out his marital problems. I was 17 at the time, but a very, very young 17. He must have been about 23. Listening to the problems made me feel a bit older, a bit more mature. Sometimes he'd hold my hand, only because he felt he could not hold his wife's hands anymore, as they were always swollen or tender or covered in yuck from other babies. I didn't mind him holding my hand. It made me feel secure, important, even a bit special.
I suppose we went for coffee about 10 times in total. The evenings were lighter as summer approached, and there seemed less need to act as a confessor. Lucy seemed more assured, more mature, and I didn't have to console her so much. She seemed to be growing into a young woman almost before my eyes. I always treat pupils as equals, even though we're not supposed to. Treat them as children, and they behave as children. Treat them as adults, and they will respond accordingly. Lucy was about to take her A-levels anyway. Plus, she'd have voted if the election had been held then. So, in many ways, she was an adult.
Even though I was 17, I'm sure Steve thought I was older. He used to talk about the government and how it was up to people like me to change things, to vote in the other party. It was always the other party, as he didn't seem to support any particular party, just anyone but the government. I think he really wanted someone of his own intellectual age to talk to, because his wife would only talk about her bodily functions and pains, babies and schooling. This guy needs a break, he used to say. As the summer evenings became lighter, he suggested that he could give me an intensive tuition in a tutorial room at the university nearby. I thought that was a good idea.
Lucy asked me if I would ever give one-to-one tuition. I think really she just wanted to continue our conversations, but in a relaxed situation that was not in the public gaze. Even then, 3 years ago, I could easily have passed for 21, and I suppose she wanted to keep me for herself. In an intellectual way, of course. I suggested a quiet room in a hotel nearby. I jokingly referred to it as my private university, and she seemed to like that idea.
Steve took me to the university. It was a hotel. He said that Dons often used the hotel during training courses, and I could see from the brochures that training courses were run there. Funny thing was that we didn't have to book in. It appeared that Steve had some sort of season ticket there. He said that he and other teachers often used the hotel for weekend courses and half-term courses, etc., and therefore had thought it cheaper to block book the seminar rooms in advance.
I took Lucy to the bedroom in the hotel. When I say a bedroom, of course, it was really a big room that happened to have a bed in it. The key thing was the desk. I thought she could spread her books on the desk, and that would help her learn. I think we both knew by then what was really going to happen.
He took me to a bedroom. I was initially very apprehensive, but then he mentioned something about spreading and seemed to think that was funny. Certainly there was a desk in the room, but there was also a huge double bed. The first time I went there, he taught me a lot of maths, but after about an hour he suggested we have coffee. In all honesty, I was quite glad about that, as I thought we would be going to the hotel bar. It was another surprise when the coffee came to the room.
Lucy's concentration powers were a bit poor. After about an hour, she wanted coffee and she seemed a little tense, so I ordered coffee to come to the room. It seemed she preferred the surroundings, more intimate, I guess. It was certainly quieter than at home with my pregnant wife complaining all the time and the other children yapping and yapping.
After the coffee, I said I had to go. Steve said that was fine and took the coffee cup from me. As he did so, his hand brushed across my hair. Initially he said that was a mistake, but later he said there had been some fluff on it or something. Whatever the reason, I didn't really mind, though part of me was screaming, "No!" That was probably just my mother talking. It was nice learning maths from someone who was trying to help me, and I was helping him too because he seemed to want to talk a lot.
I like to think we became firm friends as well. We had several meetings in the hotel. I always made sure we left together, but as we left the hotel we actually went different ways. I think it's better not to be seen emerging from a hotel with a very pretty 17-year-old.
We used to leave the hotel together, but as he lived in a different direction to me, we always parted at the entrance. Anyway, as a 17-year-old, I didn't particularly want to be seen with my teacher, even someone as friendly as Steve.
Things were going well until the last session. This was very near the exams and clearly Lucy was very stressed. She still had no boyfriend she could talk to. Her parents were divorcing and she was having problems with maths. We met as usual. She looked so clean and pure. I'm sure she did this for me. Of course we went straight to the study with a bed in it.
The last time we met was very different to the others. I'd just come home from the summer swimming gala and my hair was still wet. I had my maths books with me as usual. Steve seemed very down. He even had a bottle of vodka with him. He said that this was because it was our last meeting, and anyway, alcohol helps you relax. He offered me some. All my friends drink a lot. I don't. But if I really had to, I was sure then that I could drink as much as the next person. He suggested we have soft drinks in the bedroom as the Coca-Cola would keep me awake and the vodka would help me relax. He seemed stressed a little. His forehead was sweaty as far as I remember. In fact, thinking back, I don't really want to remember.
Lucy said she could drink a lot and drinking helped her. I gave her some Coca-Cola and she put a whole slug of vodka in it. She downed it in one and wanted another. She seemed very thirsty. She also seemed very sorry that this was the last session. I guess it was because she didn't have a boyfriend and I supplied a shoulder to lean on. Nothing else, you understand.
Anyway, it was the last session. Steve said that we could forget maths and just remember the social side. So he poured me Coca-Cola and vodka, and he had some too. Soon we were laughing, but with the laughter we seemed to get closer and closer. And then he kissed me.
Lucy seemed to be able to control her drink very well. I must admit, I was tired. I'd been keeping very long hours, and what with a pregnant wife and all that, and so the alcohol seemed to really hit me. Lucy was flirtatious. All of a sudden she leaned over and started snogging me. I know I should have stopped there and then, but...
I know I should have pushed him away, but he seemed to need me so much, and he had been so kind to me. Also, I always wanted to lose my virginity to someone who really cared about me, and he was certainly experienced in maths, and he told me he was very experienced in other things as well.
Soon we were on the bed. She seemed to have unlimited sources of energy. Must have been all the sports. I felt guilty throughout.
Before I knew what was happening, we were on the bed. He was on top of me. I was rather drunk by then, and because I had been swimming, and I was in a rush, I had left some of my, undergarments off. Anyway, we did it.
We had sex for ages.
Just the once. Then it was all over in about 1 minute. Afterwards I lay back and felt, awful.
Time was a bit short, so when Lucy was tired, I of course was completely exhausted. We just got dressed and left.
He was so fat and horrible. I realise now, but not then, that when it finished, we got dressed without saying a word, and then he left the hotel. separate ways.
Her exam was soon after. I didn't really see her again. She left the school about 6 weeks later, and she had other exams almost on the final day of term. In fact, I haven't seen her again until I met her today.
I never told anyone about this. Soon it became apparent that the innocent sex was going to have repercussions. My stomach started growing, other bodily changes, etc. When key exams were finished, I went on holiday and had a series of wild flings. I came back in August obviously pregnant. I managed to convince my parents it was a one-night stand in Spain. They supported me through university, and I tried to put it all behind me.
Well, it was nice to see Lucy today. Her husband must look like me. I don't just mean muscle and being interesting, but also facially. And Jim certainly has my looks.
It was horrible to see Steve today. It all came back. I shall make sure I always detour past the school.
Lucy was played by Ankarad Anderson Bloomfield. Steve was played by Imran Mirza.